Hello, everyone. My name is Yonatan, and here with me is Avi, and we're from the Symbolic Cognition Interaction Lab in Ben Gurion, University of the Negev, Israel. And we're here to introduce to you our approach to CLPsych 2021 shared task and how we used psychology-informed bias and feature to predict suicide. So as we all know, human behavior creates a very noisy data that usually we need large data sets to deal with. In our case, we had very small data sets, so this created an issue. We tried to, our approach to overcome this issue was relying on simple models and our domain knowledge and domain expertise in psychology. We used, we combined psychology theory-driven features, and we integrated them with previous psychological research and models. Our psychology-informed features were from behavioral features. We use social engagement as we sort of social engagement. As if you engage more socially, you will less likely to commit suicide. And sleep, and we figured out that if you're tweeting late at night, that would correlate positively with depression. Most of our features came from depression studies, as we took the Look dictionary that had a lot of previous experiments regarding depression. As we know, negative emotions and I and using personal pronouns may correlate well with depression. We also used Mind Perception Dictionary and some custom dictionaries that we created on our own from our own expertise. We tried to encapsulate the psychological previous research with as the prior distribution. So we use logistic regression with Bayesian estimation as we customize our prior distribution as the center distribution of our priors. So it was all based on previous literature and correlation with depression. We took two models using Bayesian modeling. The first one included our customized informed priors, and the second one used the general weakly informed priors that came with the framework. And now I'll pass the stage to Avi.
Okay, thank you very much, Yonatan. And here are results of our submission. We can see the results of the held out test sets in the table on the right. In terms of classification accuracy, the area under the curve scores. On the first subtask, our models performed comparably to the baseline model. On the second subtask, we had greater success with our models outperforming slightly more. Comparing between the two Bayesian models which we employed. So the first M1, the models with psychologically informed priors of previous research, slightly outperformed the weakly informed. We also had a third run model. These models, to compare ourselves, were logistic regression with regularization, which performed slightly poorer on the first subtask and slightly better on the second subtask. These differences might be because of the difference in data set sizes. Another interesting point to notice, one which we didn't in fact predict in advance, was that our models were particularly good at rooting out false positives. You can see the false positive rates are particularly low. And also, it seems that our increased F1 scores are also mainly due to lower false positives. And we'll touch on that point in a minute. To sum up our approach and submission, we had psychologically theory-driven features. We encapsulated them in a Bayesian framework in which we can incorporate previous research in the form of priors. Our models had nice successes in classification, and they did not overfit. You can see that in the paper. And also the informed priors were slightly better than the weakly informed. Now, regarding our interesting and unpredicted finding about false positives, one possible explanation for why these models were particularly good at lowering false positives. So I take you back to the Bayesian modeling, and these models perform something which is somewhat comparable to regularization in the sense that the priors were, in the previous literature, were most often lower effect sizes than what we found in the current data set. And that leads to a tempering to the fact that the posterior will also be smaller than what we see in the current data set. That manages to avoid overfitting by holding back and tempering these effects. Now, adding on that fact, the majority of the features we used were risk factors, factors that were positively correlated with suicide attempts, and not say resilience or negatively correlated. So that together with the tempering, which manages to avoid overfitting, leads to the fact that our predictions tend to be conservative and that the models will predict someone is at risk of suicide only when there's enough evidence to support that. So that's our submission. Our models were pretty simple, and so they're easily interpretable in terms of the features used and their effect sizes. And this whole approach ties in nicely with the joint cumulative effort of scientific research, in which we take previous findings, previous research, as in the form of priors, we update it in light of what we see on the current data set. This gives us newly updated knowledge, which helps increase the growing body of knowledge in this domain. That was our submission. Just a few final points of thank yous before we finish. We'd like to thank the users who contributed their data, to the people who organized this conference and the shared task, to the companies who provided computing support and the platform. Also, finally, thank you to the other team members who collaborated, to Michael, the PI, to Almog and Ram, who helped collaborate on this research, to other members of the lab who also provided help and support. So again, thank you for this chance to present here today, and thank you for your attention.